The Italian Wine Podcast is the community-driven platform for Italian wine geeks around the world. Support the show by donating at ItalianWinepodcast.com. Donate €5 or more and we'll send you a copy of our latest book, My Italian Grape Geek Journal, absolutely free. To get your free copy of My Italian Grape Geek Journal, click Support Us at ItalianWinepodcast.com or wherever you get your pods. Grazie mille.
Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm Cynthia Chaplin, and this is Voices. Every Wednesday, I will be sharing conversations with international wine industry professionals, discussing issues in diversity, equity, and inclusion through their personal experiences working in the field of wine. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate our show wherever you get your pods. Hello, and welcome to Voices. This is Cynthia Chaplin, and today I am totally excited to welcome Tahiirah Habibi to Voices. Tahiirah has a hugely impressive string of accomplishments to her name, including being the first Black woman on the cover of Wine Enthusiast when she was named a 40 under 40 tastemaker in 2020. She was in the top 5 best somms in South Florida in 2014, and in 2023, she made the list of best Black sommeliers in Ebony magazine. But she's probably best known as the founder of Hue Society, and I'm really excited to talk to her about her next venture for that. So thank you so much for making time to be with us today, Tahiirah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. That might be my favorite intro ever. It was short. It was sweet. I wasn't cringing. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to talk to you. And I know a lot of our listeners are going to be really excited to hear about what you say, but I just want to get a little of your backstory out there for, in case there's anyone left on the planet who doesn't know who you are. You grew up in Philadelphia and you moved to Miami. And I just want to talk a little bit, as you said, short and sweet, about how you found your way into the wine world. When did you decide wine was going to be your passion?
Yeah, my pathway into wine is a little bit different. It wasn't my intention to join the wine industry because I loved drinking or any of those kinds of things, or I was so passionate about wine. For me, it was more of like a power move and a way to create some access for myself. I noticed how powerful, particularly, back in when I joined the industry back in like 2008 or 9 when I started studying, it was a completely different world than it is now. Like now wine is more for enjoyment. But back then, we both know it was grueling out there. There was one lane that you could go in through the quartermasters, and it was a lot more powerful in the sense of like status and stature kind of things. And so for me, I saw that. And I also saw that people who look like me were kind of left out of it, intentionally or unintentionally. We just were not involved in it. We were not seeing ourselves. We weren't participating. I didn't grow up drinking wine. I didn't know anybody else who grew up drinking wine. So in my head, I'm a very community oriented person. So I said, oh, well, this is something I got to take back to the community. I need to take this back to the hood because this is, and I'm looking at the numbers, right? Billions of dollars in this industry. And I'm just like, what's going on? Like, this is a power thing. And none of us were really paying attention to it. So it was just interesting that I ended up, really pursuing my career. And I just happened to be really good at it at the same time.
Well, you started in hospitality, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. So I was already working in restaurants. I was a hostess when I started taking wine classes in Philadelphia. So I was taking classes at night and, doing the hostess thing during the day. And I was introduced to it because I was working at a restaurant. And, prior to that, I had been a bartender and, a cocktail server and stuff like that. So I'd already had like hospitality background.
Yeah, which is important. I think, most of us in the wine world started off somewhere in hospitality. And I think as much as, I don't think anybody ever sets off with the goal of being a waitress or a hostess forever. Having that kind of, floor experience really puts you in touch with it. So you were hostessing and bartending and you found wine and you decided that it was a big business and you wanted part of the action. I love that story. That's amazing. But it's interesting because you're completely right about, back in the day, and of course I'm older than you, so you got started in 2008. I was beyond that by some good stretch of time. And and you're right. Wine was very formal, really rigid. There were only a few paths in. For you, it was having a goal to become the first Black female master sommelier, because the court of master sommelier in the U.S. was kind of the only way in those days. I was at the court in London and doing WSET in London. Yeah, so I was white, but I was still the only woman in the room all the time.
Yeah, the outliers change, but the systems are the systems, right? So they affect us all differently. But unless you are, or in that time in particular, unless you were a white man, there was something that you were going to have to like fight through.
That's for sure. And you really, had a massive fight and, a pretty traumatic experience at the Court of Master Sommelier. Again, briefly, what happened and how did you sort of decide to veer away from that really traditional path and find, a positive way to deal with the damage that they caused while you were trying out that path?
You get so indoctrinated when you kind of start your career. And I fully believe that that was my only, even though I had certifications, they weren't enough. So I thought the only way that anybody would take me seriously, particularly as a Black woman in this space, which at the time I didn't know any other Black women. I didn't even really know any other Black people. And so I knew I had a hill that I was climbing, a mountain, not even a hill, like.
Yeah, a mountain for sure.
Right. And so I knew I had to be the best because that's just how we're programmed, right? Like anytime we go into a space which we are not the majority of representation, i.e. rap or athleticism or something like that, we have to be the best at it. And that's just that's how we're taught. And so I knew that going in. And I knew that in order for me to get to the level that I want to get into, I had to study my chocha off. And so it was definitely, I studied all the time. I moved to Miami after I finished my certifications at the Wine School of Philadelphia. And mind you, I have these certifications, so I'm good. I know my stuff. I'm smart. I know all of these things. And in my head, I was still starting at ground zero because I had not had a CMS certification. And so I moved to Miami randomly, no apartment, anything. But I had decided I'm going to start my wine career and it can't be in Philadelphia. So it's either going to be in Miami or California. Flipped a coin, ended up in Miami, was studying as I worked as, again, this time I wasn't a hostess. I was working as a cocktail server on the rooftop in a restaurant in Miami. And so I was studying, again, during the day and working at night. And so I moved in June. September was my test. So in that time, my head was down. I was just going at it, with the books, because I was so nervous about the test.
Yeah, that is not a lot of time for that test. Yes. That is a hard test.
And I was so nervous about it. I was so nervous. I was terrified. And the other part of it is I was broke, right? I had found an apartment at some point, but I had to fly to New York to take this test. That's the closest place they were offering it. And I was so hell bent on getting these certifications and, getting to the top to become a master som that, I was like, sooner the better. And so I was willing to sacrifice that time and all the things that I needed to do. But when you're taking these tests, you're funding yourself, right? Which is another barrier. And so I had to pay for my hotel. I had to pay for my flight. I had to pay for the test. It's a 2-day test. All these things are in alignment. So what ended up happening is the instructors at the beginning of the class, it was kind of pompous. And, I feel like, I don't know if it's like that anymore, but I feel like they try to intimidate you a bit.
A bit. My God. You're being very kind.
I'm being gracious, but and so they made it very clear, like you're not allowed to directly talk to me. You need to and if you do address me, you need to address me as master. It's no secret that there are not a lot of Black and brown people in the wine industry, at least at that time. And I was the only Black person in the class. And so I kind of looked around like, I know they're not being for real. And no one flinched. No one looked, no one anything. And I was just like, this, I'm just going to, like, they can't be serious. They have to mean something else. And so in my eagerness, I raised my hand because I had a question. And they didn't, they called on me And I went to start asking my question, and basically they were like, you need to address me as master. And everything in my soul shattered because I just couldn't believe that you could be this obtuse. Like, there's no way that you're telling this Black woman in this class and all the instructors were white that I need to call you master.
This is the 21st century. It's not 1855. I mean, this happened very recently.
And I was just like, there's no way. And so I knew from that point on that this wasn't my path and it wasn't something that I could continue on with. And, because the courses, they go up and up. And so the next test, you would have to serve them. And I just couldn't imagine doing service and calling them master. Like, that was just a line for me. And I didn't want to be in community or company with people who didn't see my humanity, who didn't see anything wrong with that, who didn't, feel like, oh, we might need to reel this one in, or this actually isn't okay. And I know, like, the language is not built for me. And, the courses and none of these languages are built for us. Like, even to this day, when you take these tests, it's all Eurocentric fruits and vegetables and all of that kind of stuff. And I just knew at that point, like, okay, well, this is not going to be it. So I passed the test, with flying colors because I had already had certifications. I knew the information. And so I was defeated. I was terrified. I went back home. I cried a lot, but I never told anybody because I was so scared of people not taking me serious and discrediting me and what I knew and all those things. And so I did have the one certification from them. In December of that year, I got a call to open the St. Regis because everybody in the town at that point knew that I was studying to be a som. And I would say it out loud to anybody. Oh, I'm going to be a som. Like, there's this, you make a lot of money cocktail serving in Miami, but no, this is not for me. Like, I'm not getting comfortable with this. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be a som. And so, one of the guests had recommended me, and I got a call to interview. And basically, I did well on the interview. I was very nervous. My boss at the time was very thick French accent, so I couldn't, always understand what he was saying in the interview. And so, I messed up a little bit, but they called me back and they said, we want to offer you a cocktail serving job. And I said, no. Even if it's at the St. Regis, the answer is no. I'm going to be a som. And so if I want to be a cocktail server, I'll stay where I'm at. I'll find my som job. And then they called me back and was like, okay, you're right. So they offered some position. But I knew, that fear, I lived with that fear for a long time. But then that fear kind of got pushed down because when I started working at the St. Regis, I had to start battling other, kind of situations in which I had no idea were coming at me. So I didn't even have time to focus on this looming thing of like, oh, you don't have all three of these certification kind of things. Even though I was certified, I was dealing with the guests and them not being used to seeing a Black woman on the floor.
Yeah, it's the whole imposter syndrome thing too.
Oh my God. And so they were not shy or at all about me not wanting me at their table. They would send me away. They were not shy about, the aggressions of, the racist comments, the, Kool-Aid comments, the what do Black people know about wine? Do you like Moscato? Just like,
It's just shocking. I mean, I know that it's true, and it's not something that we haven't all heard and read about and talked about for the past few years, but it's just shocking to hear it come out of your mouth that was going on, 10 years ago.
Yeah, no. And I think that the thing for me was I wasn't protected, right? When you get into these corporations, they're protecting the guests more than they're protecting their employees. And
sure, they're protecting their bottom line. Let's be honest here.
right. They're protecting their coins. And so for me, at some point, I just got tired of it. Like, I will say that working at the St. Regis and that being my first som job was incredible. Incredible experience. the person who was, mentoring me at the time, I learned so much. I've tasted probably almost every single expensive wine in the world. Like, we had a crazy wine list. I had to learn, on my feet. You had to be exceptional, and then I had the extra layer of, again, always being questioned and having to be exceptional. So I didn't have room to fail. I didn't have room to, make mistakes and all the rest of that stuff. And I had an incredible learning experience.
Who mentored you, Tahiirah? Who mentored you and lifted you up and supported you?
Well, at the time, the beverage director's name is Sebastian Verrier. He's a very sweet man. He's very French. But he's pretty well known in Miami, and he's a very kind guy for sure. And he taught me a lot of what I know about wine, particularly fine wines and vintage wines and all of that stuff. And that was just incredible, whether it was intentional or not intentional, just being in that environment and being able to watch him work. And, he is the person that interviewed me and basically gave me my first job, because if he had said no, then I wouldn't have had that job. So I'm always grateful for that. But there are also those moments in which no one was protecting me either. And no one was taking serious what I was going through on a regular basis. Like, not my mental safety was just being destroyed on a regular all the time. And on top of that, I didn't have anybody who I could talk to. I didn't have anybody who looked like me, who understood what I was going through. I didn't have anyone who would stand up for me or any of that kind of stuff. And I was just consistently being pulled apart, and not, and, whether it was the guest or the system or whatever. And so on the one hand, it's like, oh, you should be incredibly grateful that you have this opportunity and this really great job. It's a very high end luxury hotel. And on the other end, it's like, you're losing little parts of your humanity bit by bit by bit by bit every single day you go in.
I think this is something that the wine world really still has to get its head around, because it's better now, but I think our industry is incredibly competitive, incredibly blind to the challenges of being surrounded by alcohol all the time, having to always be the best, competing with everyone in the room around you. And, there isn't a lot of support. Thank God, we now have things like Hue Society and other things, because you're right. It's an industry that is not hugely aware of the mental health pressure that people in the industry face. So, you started Hue Society in 2018. And your whole aim was to counter the lack of diversity and the lack of support that you saw when you were a som. So I love the Jay-Z lyric that inspired the name. What's better than one billionaire, two, especially if they're the same hue as you. I love that. I think many, many, many BIPOC and LGBTQ plus and other underrepresented people, experience this kind of just a complete black hole in the wine world. Being in a room, seeing no one who looks like you, no one who represents your values, nobody who you can talk to and get some support from. So talk us through the creative process that brought Hue Society to life, because obviously you saw the need. When did you think it up? Who helped you out? Who were your go-to people at the beginning of Hue Society?
Are you enjoying this podcast? Don't forget to visit our YouTube channel, Mama Jumbo Shrimp, for fascinating videos covering Stevie Kim and her travels across Italy and beyond, meeting winemakers, eating local foods, and taking in the scenery. Now, back to the show.
So Hue Society was born out of something else. So in 2015, when I decided to stop being a tourist mom, I had decided I was going to become an entrepreneur, and I was going to start doing community building. And so my first organization was called Sipping Socials. And the point of it was to make sure that I was able to create wine events that catered to cultural awareness, right? Because we didn't see ourselves. And I knew there was a reason why we weren't participating, right? I knew that if we were able to maybe learn and engage through our own lens, through our own cultural lenses, through food, through music, through art, through fashion, and be ourselves, we would be more into it. And so I started Sipping Socials in Miami, and I was throwing events. I was doing wine events. I did this event called the Wine and Reggae Festival. 3,000 people showed up. And I was like, oh my God. So it works. And then, I started doing more events. And that's when I realized, like, oh, I actually, like, this is actually the key. When I understood that that worked, I was moving out of Miami to Atlanta, and I said, okay, it's time to expand. I want to create a hub, a society where everybody can we can find each other. We are kind of creating like a mental safety net of what it looks like. We might not be able to get out of these jobs, but we will have somewhere where we could go and call home. And so, yes, that's where Hue Society was born from. I wanted to create a whole society and eventually, turn that into chapters and communities and all those other things. But what I started with was just visuals. I knew we needed to see each other, and I knew we needed to see what it looked like. Right. So I started with the visuals of what that could look like. And I started an Instagram page, and I was just putting things up there of us just completely authentic, like visuals you never thought or seen before. And then people were just attracted to it. And then other groups started coming in. And now you're seeing like, oh, this person's in the wine industry, this person in the wine industry. There's people who've been in the wine industry 20, 30, 40 years that other Black and brown people didn't even know about, or indigenous people. Like, and then the community started coming together. And then I started doing the festival, right? I started doing Festival at Essence because I'm like, okay, well, we're getting the people, but where are the brands? I'll never forget the first time I got featured in a magazine. No, that's not true. The first time I got featured in a magazine, I was the top 5, Psalms in South Florida. I didn't believe it was true. I said, but they're just randomly picking people, right? And it wasn't a Black thing. It wasn't a white thing. It was just like women. And so I was like, well, they're not picking because I'm Black. So, all right. And then the next time I was in Miami Magazine, and at this point I was like, I want some Black wines to be in the photo. I never see that. And at the time, there were not a lot of like Black brands. So, there was McBride Sisters, and there was Andre Mack with Mouton Noir.
Yeah, Phil Long, people like that. Yep.
Yeah. And but I didn't know about them. In Miami, they hadn't reached there yet. So in Miami, it was just those two at that time. And so I'll never forget how terrified I was to request this wine to be in this photo shoot. I thought they were going to cancel the whole thing. Like, that's how, like, you just couldn't talk about stuff like that. And I was like, I'm going to do it anyway. And if they cancel it, they cancel it. But, sure enough, I was in this magazine, and, I had a whole photo shoot, and I used Andre Mack's Love Drunk Rosé.
Oh, I love that wine, actually.
Yeah. And like, that was like, okay, another catalyst. Like, okay, we got the people, let's bring in the brands. And so I started hard amplifying Black brands. Nobody at the time would even mention Black brands. Like, now it's a thing, and I think it's beautiful. Everybody kind of does it. Yeah, no one was talking about Black brands. It was taboo. It was like, oh, they're low quality, they're all sugar, they're blah blah. Like, there was this whole thing around it. And I was out here in the streets, like, peddling them, like, did you try this? Like, every event that I would do, I made sure from 2015, in every event or something that I show up to, at least one Black brand has to be there.
That's incredible. Yeah, and that, as you said, that was really not easy to do in 2015. I mean, I remember when your Instagram came out, I remember, being really captivated by it because, let's face it, I'm in Italy, the sort of old white men central, very patriarchal here. So I was so excited about what you were doing, and, you've grown it into this fantastic, vibrant community. You have made, that whole sort of deliberate effort to bring Black brands to the forefront, to make sure that they're, getting exposure, along with creating this whole sense of community. You made it about business too. It wasn't just about, mental health and support. It was actually about business and being an entrepreneur. And you've created this huge, vibrant community for Black wine professionals, no matter what they're doing in an industry, producers, journalists, educators, everybody. You got this giant, diverse following now. Did you ever think it would take off like this? You're providing mentorship and events and networking and education, and you have changed the industry. You definitely changed, especially in the US. So what are you doing next in the US? Because what you've accomplished in such a short time has been huge. And as you said, other communities have come in. You've encouraged other people to get involved. It has really become something super big. Did you expect that?
No.
No.
I mean, I didn't. Because it was the intention was like never about notoriety. It was purely, and it still is. It's just about humanity, and they're just like, there's no humanity in this, right? Just as a basic baseline, there's just no humanity in what's going on here. Like, you want me to change everything about myself except for the couple things that you like, just so I can enjoy a glass of wine.
Yeah, there's not a lot of room for people. I'm an educator, and I complain all the time that language keeps people out, and it makes me furious. Language keeps people out, and as you said, there was no humanity. I also feel like this very, very formal language just scares people. It's unnecessary. So it's about humanity. You're right. Wine is one of the oldest beverages in the world. We should be sharing it. We shouldn't be scared of it. It's incredible.
Wine is about memories. Like, wine is about memories. It shouldn't be about, what I have on or how I talk. And I should be able to order a wine and tell you, this reminds me of when I was little and I used to sit on my porch and eat this. Or, when I used to go to church with my grandmother and I would go in the bottom of her bag and get like the peppermints. I should be able to say that from a cultural perspective, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's just as valid as a gooseberry. Yeah.
I talk about I had a gooseberry. I never had a gooseberry prior to, intentionally going to seek one out because everybody kept saying it and I didn't want to lie about it.
Yeah, yeah. And this is why I love so much what you've done, because you kind of kick down all the doors and let people come in and feel included. This rigid system is just not for everybody, and it shouldn't be. So I'm excited because I'm going to ask you about the new venture. As I've alluded to, I'm in Italy, you're in Atlanta. So I'm in old world wine. Lots of charming old white men here. We've had a hard enough time trying to get women into the industry here. But now you want to start Hue Society in Italy, and I am really excited about this. We're on the Italian Wine Podcast, so let's talk a bit about your plans for Italy. Bringing U.S. members over here, and then getting local membership growing. What made you want to start with Italy?
We actually started with South Africa.
Easier.
I wish it was easier. It sounded easier, but apartheid is a mother effer, boy. I tell you, like,
yeah, it's not gone. People who think it's gone are completely wrong.
And then so we started with South Africa, so that was our first international chapter, and then Italy was just always curious to me because it's like you see all of these Black Italians, but you never hear about them in the industry. And then if you do, it's always on like a worker, farm worker kind of thing. And it's nothing wrong, being agricultural worker or any of those kinds of things. But I'm sure there's that, like, people are going to university and, getting these educations, but like I never see them in the forefront of anything.
You're absolutely right. And, as I said, I'm an educator. So, I see people of color in Italy in my classes, but they always look uncomfortable. I literally feel it is my job, first of all, to make everyone in my class feel comfortable before I even crack the book. So, yeah, you're right. You never see Black or brown faces, in the, as you say, in the forefront, in the important jobs, in the sort of the flashy, sexy jobs.
Yeah, it's back to that we're only used for our manual labor kind of stuff, and I just feel like, okay, well, let's figure this part out. Like, even if it's just giving people the mental stability to understand that you can be something more, and and together you're a lot more powerful than apart. And there are probably more people interested in seeing the development of what this could look like than not. And I mean, from a Black and brown perspective, like I'm not going to address like the systems. Systems are systems, right? All you could do with systems is dismantle. But the way to do that is collectively. And so I haven't seen any collective push in Italy to try to create something that is equitable for people, that gives people space and resources to build a career that they are probably longing for. I haven't seen that. And so, I had a couple people reach out to me on LinkedIn because of my work. And I'm be honest, I didn't know that my work reached that far. I'm very serious about this. So you're like, did you know the impact? I'm like, no, because I just don't think about it like that. And so when people reach out to me and they're like, oh, can you come and do this? Or we really need your help. And I'm just like, oh, okay. I didn't even know that you knew who I was, but let me see if I can figure this out.
My friend, Hue Society is bigger than you think it is, honestly.
I guess so. But I just really, I felt really compelled to figure this out. And, for a few months we've been working on this, and there've been a lot of hiccups and barriers, and people try to block, and you try to create a space, and people don't like change. They don't even like the idea of change. And I think once you get used to it, it's different. But the initial idea, the thought of like you changing something, because they think that you're trying to take their power, right? There's this insecurity that if you redistribute power, that you're going to lose yours. And that's not true. And I can tell you that from a personal standpoint, the redistribution of power and resources does not take anything away from you at all.
And often can lift you up. Right. Quite frankly, you can learn, you can grow, you can be better than you were before when you thought you were more powerful. And actually, your power can grow just by being more open to new things. So I completely agree with you. And we are very excited about you coming in 2024 and getting Hue Society off the ground in Italy. We're going to do everything we can to support you with that. But I want to talk about a couple of other things before I let you have your day back to yourself. I've got a favorite quote from you talking about your daughter. You said she learned how to swirl when she was 2, and she loves holding wine glasses and she loves swirling them. And your favorite thing about watching her do that is that it's so natural to her. You didn't get to grow up with wine, but for her, it's a natural, organic thing. And it's really incredible to witness her. And I had similar things with my daughters. I didn't grow up with wine either. And they were swirling their milk at dinner when they were little because that they thought that's just what everybody did. But all of our daughters now can find wine really accessible because they've always seen it through us. So, how can we make this happen for more young people, more women, more people of color? How can we kick open these doors even farther and make them feel welcome, make them feel like it's an organic place for them to be?
I believe that we have to normalize what's normal to us, right? Like right now, this wine thing is normal to us. And the more you normalize it, and by that, I don't just mean like the beverage. I mean normalize your language in the wine space. Normalize who you are and how you show up in the wine space, right? Because one thing I never want my daughter to see me doing is pretending to be somebody else to be accepted. And I think it's so important that we start normalizing and accepting and understanding like there's not one way to do something. And people have brilliant minds that do not look like you. And the more we're able to accept what that is and be open to the idea that, hey, I don't have to talk about gooseberries. I want to know what did you grow up with? Like we're forced to learn this. But can we normalize what somebody else grew up, drinking or eating?
Yeah, and exalt it. Everybody's experience is valuable. The other thing you were instrumental in launching, sort of along these lines, was Roots Foundation with Carlton McCoy and Ikimi Dubois. So you were providing scholarships and job placements in the wine industry. And to be honest, this is putting your money where your mouth is, because it's okay to build a community and get people in, but if you can't pay them, educate them, you're not going to get far. So, you said you want Hue Society and Roots Foundation to become the #1 wine community in the world and create impactful events and be a conduit of change, that we've talked about so much. So overall, what's the strategy? How are we going to get this money into the right hands, get people with scholarships, get people with jobs in the industry that we, as you said, they're longing for? I thought that was a really emotional word to use, because you're right about that. What's your vision for this side of the coin? Getting people to, open up the doors, give people jobs, give people scholarships. We can make them fall in love with wine, but we need to put money into this. What's the strategy?
I think, holding people accountable. Who are the powers that be? Who are the decision makers? How are we getting to those people? Because that's where it starts. And I also think that social proof is really important. And so when we get people who are in high positions that are in alignment with us, that are, actually putting their money where their mouth is and not just talking about it, or at bottom levels, putting people of color in front facing positions to create a facade, but at the top level the decision makers all still look the same. That's what I focus on. I see the bottom level stuff.
Yeah, that's so true. Not tokenism. We need diversity all the way through the industry.
And you need to hold people accountable. Like, they have this term, holding people to the fire, putting people to the fire, whatever, and that, it sounds negative, but it's the truth on some level. It's just like, you got to apply pressure sometimes. And the thing is, I've never been afraid to apply pressure, or to, be very vocal and honest about what's going on. And I'll tell you, like, hey, because I don't believe that no one owns me. I don't owe anybody anything. So I don't feel that pressure to be silent about issues or things that I see that are wrong, or that are happening in the world, or in the wine world, or wherever. Because at the end of the day, I'm always going to try and do what's right and what's best for the greater, community. And so,
yeah, you're right. What you said about, it's not negative, this, needing to be loud and needing to hold people accountable. It's not negative. There are a lot of decision makers out there who are really great people, and they're just not aware of, their mental process is, biased. They aren't even aware of it. So, holding them accountable, educating them, making them see is going to make a difference. I completely agree with you there. I know that just this year you won Wine Enthusiast Wine Star Award for Visionary of the Year, so you're an Advocate of the Year from Vine Pair Magazine, and you're on the board of James Beard Awards. So you are becoming one of these people with power. So you're becoming one of these decision makers in a front-facing role, as I said, with a far bigger reach than you think you have. I can promise you that. So, you've got these roles coming to you now. You've earned them. You've got them in your hands, promoting diversity and hospitality industry. And can you leverage your perspective? How are you going to use your power to do these things? Because it's not easy. And you are the person who's going to be leading the charge. I really think that.
I believe in equity. And I think that people have to learn the difference between equity and equality.
That is so true.
I am not afraid to sacrifice or say no to things, if it's right, and if it's the right thing to do, and I'm gonna make sure that, we're changing the room. I'm not afraid to lose things in order to make that happen. And some people are afraid to walk away from jobs or positions, or money in particular, if it's out of alignment. If it's not in alignment with my goals and equitable situations, or all those kind of things, I walk away from it. The answer is no. And I think that, I'm kind of building that reputation in the sense of, like, I'm okay with those sacrifices. And I think that as a leader, you have to be willing to do that if you're going to stay in tune with where you're trying to go, and making sure that you are leading your community to a better place, and leaving every space better than which you came into it.
It's brave and risky, both.
Oh, for sure. It's terrifying. I won't pretend like, I think that you can be brave and be terrified at the same time. I think they go hand in hand, actually. it's completely terrifying because, this is also my livelihood, and I have a child and I have a family and all those things. And so me doing these things is not easy. It's not the glory or any of the rest of that stuff. Like, I've lost out on a lot of things because I say no when I know that you're trying to use me or get me to validate, or using my likeness to validate whatever's going on. And I know that what you're actually doing is not equitable, and it's not going to help anybody but you or your business, or whatever that looks like. And so I try to stay off as authentic as possible, and normalize what that looks like. You're going to see my big earrings, you're going to see my braids, you're going to see all of these things, and those are just powerful decisions in itself, because a lot of people are not able to show up as themselves. And I try to encourage that as much as possible, because again, the more we normalize our basic humanity in our joy, the more the systems start to change, because they don't have a choice.
Well, I think there is no way I'm going to get anything more impactful out of you than that. So I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to tell you right now that I am really looking forward to seeing you authentically show up in Italy, because I know that we're going to do some good work, and I know that you are going to be a great power for change with Hue Society here. So thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you, and I will see you in 2024.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this and the challenge, and and the fruitfulness that shall be gained from these new experiences.
Thank you for listening, and remember to tune in next Wednesday when I'll be chatting with another fascinating guest. Italian Wine Podcast is among the leading wine podcasts in the world, and the only one with a daily show. Tune in every day and discover all our different shows. You can find us at ItalianWinePodcast.com, SoundCloud, Spotify, Himalaya, or wherever you get your pods.